most peculiar military offensive in modern times. Why do you think that?
Well, because the whole thing about Bakhmut, which has been very strange from the beginning, is the Russian need to take it, because Bakhmut is of no strategic importance. It doesn't make anything. So there's no war industry there. There's no raw materials there that are desperately needed for the Ukrainian war effort. There are no people there. Almost everybody has left. I mean, it's basically just empty buildings. And yet the Russians seem to put enormous store into the idea that they would take it, so that they were going to make, and it probably was, at least for a while, a entirely political campaign from the Russian point of view. One, it was they needed to take something. They needed to show some success for what they were doing. But then also there was a competitive, it seems, Wagner Russian army element too, where Wagner wanted to show that they could take Bakhmut, or Prigozhin wanted to say for his own. So the Russians were taking it not so much to damage Ukraine, not to sort of damage Ukraine as a fighting force, but actually for their own domestic political needs or political effects. But therefore, the Ukrainians, I think, understood that, and they understood that the Russians were going to expend enormous resources to take Bakhmut for these political reasons. And the Ukrainians decided, therefore, to fight for the city because knowing the Russians felt they had to take it. This Ukrainian attack is going to be the most important military operation this year by a long way, and up as long with sort of the defense of Kyiv, probably the most important military operations the Ukrainians are going to run in this entire war. Now, what they don't want to happen, or didn't want to happen, is for the Russians to sit back in the defensive of take Bakhmut, declare victory. They're building all these trench lines, and to go back into the defensive. And that was the thing the Ukrainians don't want, because the Ukrainians don't want a big, strong Russian army sitting in all these defenses. So the Ukrainians thought, how do we actually make the Russians expend force? We know they want to take Bakhmut, and other towns like Advika too. There were a few other towns that seemed to be obsessing the Russians. And therefore, as horrible as it is, we have to fight for these cities, because that's going to keep the Russians attacking and keep the Russians losing soldiers and equipment. And in that sense, it seems to have done the horrible thing it was supposed to do.